Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open one of India's biggest tax reforms ever, the Goods and Services Tax, or GST. We're going to get into the whole engine behind it, from the constitutional change that made it happen to the reason your bill gets split into two different taxes.
So let's just dive right in with this question, because you've probably asked yourself this 100 times. And the answer, well, it unlocks the entire design of India's really unique GST system. Seeing both CGST and SGST isn't a mistake or some weird double tax, it's actually the blueprint for how it all works. You know, before GST came along in 2017, India's tax system was, to put it mildly, a mess. It was this crazy patchwork of different central and state taxes. The big promise of GST was to just sweep all that complexity away and create one single unified market.
Yeah, the whole idea was to get rid of a dozen different taxes, things like excise duty, VAT, service tax, you name it, and replace them with just one. This was a huge deal because it was designed to kill the old tax-on-tax effect, where businesses were literally paying taxes on the taxes they'd already paid. It was all about making the whole structure simpler and fairer for everybody.
But to really get how it works, we have to look at the legal foundation, which is the Central Goods and Services Tax Act of 2017. Think of this as the official playbook that defines every single move in the GST game.
So what's fascinating here is how the law defines supply. It's incredibly broad. We're not just talking about a simple sale, a transfer, a barter, even a lease or a rental. If it's done as part of a business, it counts as a supply. This right here is the fundamental event that triggers GST.
And here's the other piece of the puzzle. If you have a supply, as the law defines it, and you have some form of consideration, which is basically any kind of payment for it, then bam, GST is almost certainly in the picture. These two concepts, supply and consideration, are really the twin pillars holding up the entire tax structure.
Okay, so this brings us to the real engine room, the dual model. This is the reason you see those two taxes on your bill, and it's a design that was chosen specifically to fit India's unique federal system.
At its heart, it's really a power-sharing agreement, and it's baked right into India's constitution. You see, to make GST happen, the constitution itself had to be amended. That was the 122nd Amendment Act, and it was a huge step that gave both the central and the state governments the power to tax the exact same transaction.
So how does that tax get shared? Well, it all comes down to one simple factor, geography. Is the transaction happening inside a single state? That's called interstate, or is it crossing state lines, which makes it an interstate supply?
All right, so let's say you buy something within your own state, an intrastate deal. The GST that's collected gets split right down the middle. Half of it goes to the central government as CGST, and the other half goes to your state government as SGST. It's one transaction, but two governments get their share.
But things get different when a transaction happens between states. Here, the seller charges just one tax, Integrated GST, or IGST. Now, the central government collects all of this tax up front. Then it sends the state's portion over to the government of the destination state. And this is an absolutely critical feature. GST is a destination-based tax. That means the tax money goes to the state where stuff is actually consumed, not where it was made.
So that's the theory. That's how the tax gets collected. But what about the real-world impact? I mean, a major promise of GST was that it would actually bring prices down for all of us. So, did it?
This was the big sales pitch, right? By killing that cascading tax-on-tax problem and letting businesses claim credit for taxes they paid on their inputs, the whole supply chain was supposed to become way more efficient. And the logical result of that? Cheaper prices for you and me.
Well, researchers at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, or NIFPP, decided to put this to the test. They dug into the inflation data in India, looking at the numbers before and after GST was launched in July 2017, to see if there was any obvious change.
Okay, first, let's just set the scene. What did the economy look like when GST arrived? The GDP numbers here show that growth was pretty moderate. The economy wasn't overheating, but it wasn't in a slump either. And that's actually kind of perfect for this analysis because it means there weren't any huge outside forces that were already pushing prices way up or way down.
So, what was the verdict? After crunching all the numbers, the researchers' conclusion was pretty clear. They couldn't find any significant break in the trend of consumer price inflation. That's the rate your everyday stuff gets more expensive right after GST was put in place. The reform just didn't have that immediate price-reducing effect that so many people had hoped for.
And that leaves us with a final thought. This complex system, this dual GST architecture, is now the law of the land. It's a fundamental rewiring of India's entire economy. And while it might not have made things cheaper overnight, its long-term impact on things like formalizing the economy and growing the tax base, well, that story is still being written. The system is in place, but the revolution it promised is very much a work in progress.